Hello, and welcome to the Complicated Women podcast, a show dedicated to discussing the complex women of Dimension 20. I'm your host, Andrew, and joining me today is Stody originator, president of the Glenn Close fan club, and the person who single-handedly put Ham Dog on the map, Laney.
What a legacy! What a legacy!
What?
I wasn't expecting any of that. Oh my god.
I had
Yes, it's funny. I asked Squid because I knew off the bat I was like Glenn Close fan number one. But then I was trying to like come up with other stuff, and then Squid mentioned Ham Dog, and I was like, I completely forgot about Ham Dog.
honestly, thank you for your service.
Thank you so much, Miss Hamdog, Mr. Hamdog, my personal favorite. I got really into it. I did bid. That is a different story for a different day, and maybe even a different podcast.
I know they like made a second Calroy mini and for like the people for like the collective fund, but I'm still kind of bummed that like someone private got the real one.
I'm more than anything like interested in. I would love a podcast that interviewed all the people who bought the minis. So if any of you want to come forward after hearing this, please hit my line. I would love to just have a discussion with you about. I don't want to make it like I'm not shaming you in any way. I am just scientifically interested in you as a person.
I also would like to say that if you did buy one of the Dimension 20 minis and you have disposable income, my DMs are also open for other reasons. I'm going to leave it at that, but, you know.
Exactly.
So, I want to know, how did you get started with Dimension 20? Like, what does the road look like that leads Laney to getting into D20?
Okay, I like to make this joke a lot because it was my college roommate who got me really into the show. I was listening to my brother and me, and she was like, hey, there's this show I saw on YouTube where the McElroy brothers are there, and it's kind of like there's like drawings that kind of like go in between and they're playing a game, and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. So I started with Tiny Heist, and then I got into Fantasy High right around the time the pandemic hit, and I finished Fantasy High to be able to watch A Crown of Candy live. So that was like my first season to watch coming out. So truly, I like to say me being honest on my college roommate application is what got me into Dungeons and Dragons. But
yeah,
it is honestly such a domino effect to meeting a ton of really great people.
My first college roommate was trans, and I didn't know that, and then now I am too. So
wow,
college roommates can do a lot for your personal growth
in many ways, positive and negative.
Do you have any favorite seasons? I think I can probably take a pretty educated guess at least one of them.
But I love A Crown of Candy. I love A Crown of Candy. I also love The Unsleeping City. That's a series that's just like super close to my heart. I am a defender of the Zoom season, despite it being a Zoom season. I also like side quest wise, I feel like a lot of them don't get as much love as they deserve. I'm personally impartial to Shriek Week. I feel like that one definitely does not get the hype it deserves. It's a very good season. Yeah. What about you?
That's for me, obviously A Crown of Candy is up there. If you're wondering at home why we're doing 2 back-to-back episodes of A Crown of Candy characters, it's because it's my podcast and it's my favorite season. But after that, I would say it's probably the 7. And then, I said this to Squid in the last episode. I think junior year might be up there. I'm a little less confident about it securing that like 3rd place spot after the last episode because I wasn't really, rocking with it super hard. I feel like they might kind of be like stumbling through the end a little bit, but the rest of it is so good.
Except for the first episode.
I was sick this past week and watched the entire season, and really learned a lot.
Yeah. I mean, since we're talking about junior year, obviously this is a podcast where we deep dive into characters from past seasons, but part of the reason I started this was to increase the overall media literacy of the fandom. And so I do want to talk about some like quote unquote current events happening and like discourse TM. Because I think Twitter and other forms of social media are the worst possible place to have nuanced discussions. And so I want to bring those discussions here where we can actually sit and talk about it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point too, because oftentimes 240 characters isn't a whole lot to say what, like, anything complex or interesting, and even with a long thread, it's just not designed for honestly really robust conversation. So it's really cool that you're giving it more of a platform to have those more in-depth conversations about characters who are kind of difficult at times.
I wasn't fishing, but I like what I caught.
Let's see. So the big sort of, this is gonna come out in like a week and a half, so it's gonna be pretty old news. It's kind of old news at this point, honestly, but the reaction to the last episode of junior year was super polarizing, at least on Twitter. And there were a lot of people that were very upset that other people did not like the episode. And rather than talk about my thoughts on the episode, like I could actually, no, we'll talk about the episode because I don't really, okay, the Allie role at the end was funny. Was it the funniest thing I've seen? No. Is it even, I think, the funniest thing that happened in that episode? Not really. I'm much more, I think I laughed more at, like, the Jawbone interaction at the beginning of the episode and the Eugenia stuff than the role. But it is definitely shocking.
It was giving very Never After to me, which is I not giving it particularly a positive nor negative connotation, but it was very reminiscent of that to me. And I thought it was like, I thought the role was pretty good. I thought it was overhyped in marketing, which is again just like a part of the process of getting people to watch the show. And I'm sure, and I'm glad people had fun with it. And I think everyone's entitled to their own opinion if they like the episode or not. And more than that, they're entitled to the opinion of like being able to express that opinion in either way. And also, I don't know, personally, I loved Brennan's reaction. That made me laugh so much. No, we're done here. We're done. You don't get to say anything else. That cracked me up, but
and Allie immediately backtracking, be like, "Oh, we don't actually have to do this. Like, I don't think,
he's like, no.
technically it's against the rules."
But yeah, and there's something that Brennan said in the adventuring party that I want to dig into, which he says something about like there is a section of people in the fan base that will see this and then decide not to follow us further, and then Siobhan says something like if you don't accept us at our goofiest, you don't deserve us at our crying. And I think that points to a fundamental misunderstanding with the reason people have for the critiques of Dimension 20. I don't think there's, at least from what I've seen, I don't think there's really ever been any backlash towards something because it was funny. There's people who think that they should take things more seriously, but Dimension 20 is a comedy show. It's on a comedy streaming network. We understand that it's a comedy. That's not the issue here. The issue is that it doesn't work with a lot of times the comedy is inconsistent with the story that they're trying to tell.
Yes. I have gotten a lot of heat for that very opinion before. I strongly agree.
And there's also this like emotional attachment and reaction that a lot of fans have, especially the ones who watch it just for like the laughs and to see the intrepid heroes, which again, I said this last week, that is perfectly valid if that is your way of watching the show.
And if your experience of viewing it comes down to I liked it because I liked it, that's fine. But when people are trying to engage in intelligent discussion about the medium, saying it's just a D&D show, like it's not a TV show, why are you taking it so seriously? You sound dumb. You sound stupid. And you shouldn't be coming into that space if you're not ready to engage with those other people on their terms.
I think that's a fair point. And I mean, like, you don't go to a butcher expecting to find dessert. Like, you don't go to this type of space and expect it to be like one thing or the other. I think it's okay that there's different interpretations of this media, and I think that's a great thing, even. And I think we shouldn't be trying to police one another on what we enjoy about this show. It's just cool that we all enjoy it, but like, let people hold space for their opinions, hold space for disagreements. I think that creates for a lot more of a healthy discourse.
Right. Of course. But if you ever want to fight with me, I love fighting people on Twitter. So if you think I'm an idiot and you want to get in my mentions, do it. What do you think of the new season? Should I hop on board?
Well, the thing is I haven't listened to it yet. I have heard it's very good. It is a different DM. It's Will who's taking the reins. I would recommend. Okay, Dungeons and Daddies is not for anyone who enjoys D&D. If you are like someone who loves battle episodes, really into crunchy mechanics, this is not the show for you in any regard of that word. They do not care about systems or anything. They're all writers who are really good at telling stories, but very bad at learning board games. And they say this and they own up to this, and this is kind of their vibe. However, this next one is like 1950s horror season, and they're all on like a bowling league, and I think that is beautiful. So I haven't listened.
That sounds bad.
Yeah, and it's like Call of Cthulhu, so that's pretty fun.
That's also pretty slay. Okay, I think I'll check it out. Okay. Also, in other Dropout news, R.I.P. the Dropout Discord.
That they just announced.
We don't have the right cut. I don't have the money. I'm doing this on like a shoestring budget. I bought this microphone like 3 years ago.
It's so true.
No, yeah, but God, you know, what a toxic place. And I can't say that I was ever really active on it or that I'm gonna particularly miss it, but it is like kind of a big deal, I think.
It's a sizable deal, I personally think, and I know a couple of the mods. I know it's just like very difficult to manage, and it's thousands upon thousands of people. I just do not. My personal opinion is that there is probably never going to be a Discord that large that can be ran in a good, healthy way. I think they tried their best, but It is a cesspool at times. So.
Oh, for sure. I think Dropout, Dropout, if you're listening to this, Andrew Bridgman, you can steal this idea. I think they would do very well if they started like an early 2000s sort of era forum for Dropout, and you know, and then that would allow them not only to moderate things more easily, and have like, you know, specific threads that are easier to like sort through. You also take the Reddit away and put it into a space where they control the moderation and can
like actually implement changes what they want to see, you know.
It sounds halfway Dropout Discord, halfway Reddit, and I'm not sure if it's going to take the best parts of both of those or the worst parts of both of those. And we do have the chance of making a very true monster. However, I like the vibe.
And if we do make a monster, then I'll have so much more material for this
You would
podcast.
have so much more material.
I think it's time for us to move on to everyone's favorite segment, Woman of the Week, where we each get a brief yet unspecified amount of time to explain why the person that we picked is our personal
Woman of the Week. Before I get into who my pick is, I want to give a little peek behind the screen. We are recording this on May 12th, aka Mother's Day. And since we have since we're discussing a character where motherhood is a central part, I thought it was only right to stay on theme, and that is why Shauna Shipman from the show Yellowjackets is my Woman of the Week. Shauna Shipman, I love you. You're so great. First of all, Melanie Lynskey slays down in everything she does, and Yellowjackets is no different. By the way, spoiler alert for Yellowjackets season 2. Go watch it. I'll put a time code in the description that you can skip to after we're done talking about Shauna. Shauna Shipman, like Caramelinda, has a very complicated relationship with motherhood because of the trauma that she's gone through, right? She's pregnant when the plane crashes, is like the object of worship in this really weird way for like the entire time that everyone knows she's pregnant, and then has an incredibly traumatic like stillbirth. And so as a result of that, in the future timeline, it's virtually impossible for her to connect with her living daughter, because she still is scared that connection is going to be ripped away from her again. It's so juicy and so perfect. I love Yellowjackets. I know you are also a fan of Yellowjackets. Do you have any Shauna Shipman thoughts?
What don't I have? This could be an episode in its own. I love that woman. Everything. Talk about complicated women. Talk about women who grapple with their anger and grief in very tangible ways. I think Shauna as a mother is such an interesting figure as well because so much of her is projecting like these ideas of Jackie onto her daughter, and like that's even shown by her daughter dressing up as Jackie for Halloween. Um, it's just this degree of she doesn't want to be a mother because she never got to be a daughter. You know what I mean? She never got to be that young kid. She got ripped away from her childhood. It's yeah, I would recommend Yellowjackets as a show if you check all of the content warnings ahead of time, just to be like on a safety level, but also it's just very, very well developed. I think they fumbled the last season, but that is my 2 cents. The last episode was a little messy, and if I think about Natalie too long, I might throw up.
That, you know what, that is fair. I think if I remember correctly, there was some rumblings about there maybe being like a Euphoria style like special episode before season 3 starts. I could be fully telling tales out of school. I'm not like, don't take my word as gospel, but that is, if that does end up happening, I would be very excited for that.
I am very interested in that and hope it's true. But I also love spreading misinformation. So take everything Andrew says as gospel.
Laney, famed gaslighter. I'm not going to blow up your spot, but if you know, you know.
If you know, you know. I love to lie, is the thing about me. But I will tell the truth about my woman of the week, who is another mother, because I love mothers. I love complicated mothers. Mine is from The Haunting of Hill House, which is one of my favorite books and one of my favorite TV series. I will be choosing Miss Olivia Crane, who is a very complicated woman who is dealing with a lot of mental illness and also being literally haunted and dies just because she wants to protect her kids. That's her driving force. And I think that is a beautiful thing.
God, I love Mike Flanagan, and I think Mike Flanagan does family relationship or family dynamics so well. And the way that the Crane children in that show as adults are thinking about and interacting with the idea of their mother is
so juicy and so just fascinating and tragic. Now if I not Olivia, but if I start thinking about Nell for too long, I might also throw up.
Felt. I am a menace to watch the 6th episode of that show with. I watch the behind the scenes. I know so much about the production side of it that I'm like, oh my god, did you know that their camera almost broke at this part? And did you know this is set to a metronome? Like, anyway, I get way too into the nitty gritty of that show. So this is, again, not to keep pitching podcasts to you in your episode of your podcast, but these are several ideas someone's got to fund. I'm just saying.
Yeah, right. Here, listen. If there's like an outpouring of interest and also funding, right? Like if I can figure out a way to make more episodes in my schedule, I would love to do bonus episodes about non D20 characters, because this is like the shit I do for fun, is sit and think about like if I could monologue for hours about Asuka Langley Soryu from Evangelion. I could talk forever about oh god, who's another one? I'm like looking around. I can and will talk about the Lady Jessica in a video that's going up on my personal channel. Not soon, because that one's scripted and it's fucking so long. I haven't even finished writing the script. But yeah, my point is that, yeah, slay.
Love mothers. Shout out moms.
Shout out mom. Shout out my real life mother. Becky,
oh my god,
you slay.
Shout out my real life mother.
All right, let's move on into our main discussion of the character of the day, Caramelinda of House Rocks, the Queen of Candia, and also basically also the King of Candia, right? Do you have any opening thoughts that just like in general, maybe something like a short and sweet anecdote, like why do you love Caramelinda so much? Where does that come from?
Such a good question. I like Caramelinda so much because she is a woman who, in my opinion, is one of the emotional heart of A Crown of Candy can be reflected off of her. I think she's an incredibly complicated character who has so much dimension for an NPC. And I think it's just so fascinating to see how the players interacted with her, how Brennan brought her forward, how the entire show ends with a comment on her being scared. I think that contextualizes the whole show for me. Regardless, that's probably what I'm going to talk a lot about. I also want to start by just saying, before anyone comes at me, I love my 3 favorite characters in A Crown of Candy. In no particular order. They're kind of tied. It just depends on the day. Are Caramelinda, Saccharina, and Ruby. I love women who fight. I love their conflict. I think it is super based in, I think that it was a little forced at times, but I do think that it makes narrative sense. And I like that.
Right. Yes. I think I want to just really quickly jump back to one of the things you said. You mentioned that she is like the emotional heart of A Crown of Candy. And I mean, also, one of her titles in like the fictional world of The Crown of Candy is Heart of the Realm. So it is very much, she is a character that is ruled by her emotions in this way, but in so that she tries to like hide them.
Yeah.
She's very emotional, but she is trying her best to sort of not give in to that at any given point.
And it's out of a place of fear. The reason why she isn't gonna be like, she cries a lot after Jet dies. Like, she cries when they come back from Kamada and like Lapan is dead. They're about to get episode 9. And she cries when she hugs her daughters. She cries when she finds out Jet is dead. She cries at the funeral. She sobs to Amithar. Those are the type of times where she's like really, she's kind of processing a lot of the grief as an NPC that most of the party isn't particularly diving into except for Ruby. But
Right.
it's because they're on such a like tight schedule. Everything is so scary and happening right now that you don't really have time to unpack it. You don't have time to grieve.
Exactly. And we talked about this in the last episode too, but the fact that the show itself was cut short and there was like a quickening of the pace from like a meta level is like also, I think, part of it. Her being ruled by fear in this way, I think, leads into the topic of motherhood, because Caramelinda's entire like basically parenting strategy is ruled around fear for very, very justified reasons.
She's very much thinking about like how the safety of her kids and Liam as well. She keeps like looping him in as well. She's like when they come back, they're like, it's okay, we're war guys now. And she's like, none of you are war anything. She's deeply afraid of these kids getting hurt. The idea of like in Ruby's flashback where she's like, life is going to be hard enough as it is. You don't need to be making it harder. A lot of her background from the House Merengue is very much, she grew up as a countess in like the eastern wastes of Candia. She wasn't a particularly like high level royal. So she understands that at any point you can become very vulnerable, and she really wants her kids to be safe, and that's like her main priority here. And so she feels insanely, what do I want to say here? She feels really disappointed in herself when Jet dies because she feels responsible that she wasn't a good enough mother, and that is why she's dead.
Right. And you know, at Jet's funeral scene, right? There's the moment Caramelinda is sort of saying her piece, and she says something like, "I can't help but stand here and think, if only you had listened to me more, or maybe if I had been." And then Siobhan cuts Brennan off, and because Ruby is walking away, and she doesn't get to finish her thought there. But it's clear to me that she very clearly blames herself. She is like processing the grief in a way that's like, it's my fault. I didn't prepare them enough for the world. I was so hard that I became my mother, who was so overbearing, and all I wanted to do because of that was to run away. And even though I tried to save my daughters from the same feeling, I ended up just reinforcing it.
Mm-hmm. And so much of that where as a mother, she talked about how like her mom was that overbearing force that you were just talking about there. And that's kind of like the conclusion of Caramelinda's character in the series, is when her and Ruby are having this conversation, like I think it's just before the war, or just after the war, where the final battle, where Ruby says, we have to be able to forgive Sakurina. We have to be able to give her a chance. She hasn't had a chance to have a family before. And that courage is what shocks Caramelinda out of this paranoid grief that she's feeling. Is that courage coming from her daughter that she did not have.
Caramelinda's reaction to Sakurina, right? I think that is a very interesting lane for discussion, because we talked about this in the last, I keep saying we talked about this in the last episode, and it sounds annoying, but it's really hard to talk about any character without talking about other characters in the show as well, especially with a season like A Crown of Candy, which is so based on like interpersonal conflict and like emotional, like contrasting emotions. But Sakurina is this sort of reincarnation or like successor to Lazuli, who is Caramelinda's dead wife that she never really got over. And it's, you know, it makes sense why she would see this avatar of the mistake that Amathar made that ruined her life, and is also a representation of this person that she can never have back in her life, and why she would react so negatively to Sakurina.
I mean, it's super interesting when you watch the show again, specifically if you want to, like, because I personally did this getting ready for this episode, as you're watching specifically Caramelinda and watching her grow and her opinions specifically, when you're not in there for just the story or whatever PC you like, but for this one NPC, there's a really interesting thing because early on, she's just like, what, screw me. Yeah, my daughter's dead. Everything's bad. This might as well happen too. But she's also like, Caramelinda is kind of like prideful at first. She's like, she knows that Sakurina is good for the realm. Like, she's smart. She's the perfect answer. I think in one of the adventuring parties, Murph says that Sakurina is the exact answer they needed at the worst possible time. And they just do not trust her for a number of reasons. They're scared and vulnerable and worried about people betraying each other now. But Sakurina repeatedly tries to make a connection with Caramelinda, which I find very interesting. She repeatedly is like, she's casting spells on her. She's trying to be like, oh my gosh, she's so smart. She like says that when she does something that's like a strategy-based idea. She's very kind to her and like asks for consent to cast a spell on her. Like, just a very nice person. I think it really comes to a head with Port Syrup, where Caramelinda is realizing, oh my god, this girl is out. Maybe not this girl specifically, but at least the Marauders are out of hand.
Right.
And I think that's oftentimes where people come into like the Caramelinda Sakurina dynamic, and they're saying that like they side really hard with one or the other, and say screw the other, screw that one, or they'll say that like Caramelinda's really mean. I think that they say that for a different reason, so I will not convolute that with a different issue yet. But with the Sakurina stuff, a lot of it comes down to, in my opinion is Caramelinda's putting what her, I think it's good that she's complicated. I think it's good that she's a little messy here. That she's like, you know, if something happened in combat and she died, would that be so bad? I think that is incredible.
And her, oh god, this is like kind of a tangent, and I do want to like hop back to talk about something like related to what you said more, but I wrote down a line when I was reading through the transcripts early on. It's in episode 9 when she talks to Amathar like one-on-one, and she's like, well, you must be pretty happy war's finally coming back to the realm. And it's like, god damn, she knows. She is so like collected most of the time, and she's my favorite type of woman, where she knows exactly how and when to weaponize her like intelligence and to have the most devastating possible effect on a person.
Oh, she is so mean, and I love that so much. That conversation with Theo after he gets the snake, I love that. I love how mean she is. She's like, oh, and whose fault was that? Who was supposed to be protecting her? And now she's watching over you.
Did you lose track of the princesses again? Like, oof. But yeah. She has she is justified in feeling this way, because, you know, there's this kind of relates back to the way people are treating the rat grinders, not to take a huge like hard turn to junior year, but there's this idea that teenagers are adults and should be held like, obviously teenagers are like somewhat fully formed, right? They're not 5-year-olds, but they are still children. Jet and Ruby are children. They turn the first episode takes place on their 18th birthday. So they are, for all of the stuff about, they're now woman grown and they are able to defend themselves in combat. They're still kids that need the adults around them to watch out for them because their prefrontal licorice cortexes are not fully formed yet. Not for at least another 7 years.
Yeah, they needed that sort of like, I don't know, that guidance, that protection. Now, to be fair, I do love that it's their curiosity into Caramelinda that got Jet killed. That it was that letter that was found in Caramelinda's desk that like sent them to the lingerie shop where Jet got killed. I think that is really beautiful. That's another layer as to why like Caramelinda is going to blame herself. She did not prepare them well enough. They were chasing after a secret that they thought she was keeping from them. She sent all of the soldiers away because Calroy told her the fight was going to be at Jawbreaker, and she didn't think to question it. Every part of this, she feels at blame, and there's a part where she apologizes to Theo after being like freaking out at him. And she says something to the effect of like, if you were in my position, where is it? Oh, when you have failed as completely and totally as I have, and you are afraid that the weight of that failure will destroy you, you will panic and try and put that on someone else. And I think that is like at the core, her anger, her frustration is that she's trying to not bear that on herself because she blames herself so much for everything that happened wrong.
Right. One of the things that I find so fascinating with regards to that is that Caramelinda, does blame herself for all of these failures, but she also doesn't feel like she has any control whatsoever with what happens in her life. And if you just look at her history, right, her wife is dead, life completely ripped out from underneath her, and then but she has to still marry into the Rocks family to keep this political relationship. So she marries Amathar and then becomes queen, is the primary ruler of Candia for years because Amathar is illiterate and stupid. And I don't think that's a controversial take. I love Amathar. He's a great character, but he's dumb as rock.
Like canonically stupid. I love him.
But so then she has like grown accustomed to be in this position of power, right? On some level, I don't know if there's any like textual evidence for this, but at some level, I feel like she probably feels like she deserves to be queen. Because she's, done all this work, obviously Squid was last week's guess, but Caramelinda, they both are like, they're both like minor lords who feel that they deserve to be in this position of power because they have worked and struggled for so long and so hard, and they both hate Amathar's fucking guts.
I feel like we're not going to beat the misogyny allegations if we continue to talk about Caramelinda. However, you're on to something. I don't want to say it, but
I'm cooking, definitely. But that Caramelinda thing was a tangent. Back to the actual point that I was making.
Cut that.
So no, we're gonna keep that in. She has grown accustomed to this position of power, and then in the span of an hour, her daughter is killed, within the span of like a few days, her husband is revealed to have been married to someone else, which means that she was never married, which means her children are bastards, which means she's no longer the queen. Then her daughter is murdered. She is thrown out of the castle, made to flee into the woods, and is, once again, her entire life is completely ripped up from underneath her.
she has a line specifically where she says, I can't remember the last time I felt like I've had a handle on my own life. Where
Right.
she's like, she's free falling. For the second half of this show, when we first meet her, she is like, oh, so why are you kids all so dirty? Why is everyone here a fucking idiot? And why can't anyone get their life together? Also, I'm not sure what the rating on this is. I apologize if I was not supposed to curse. However,
Where,
this woman is so in charge, so like large and in charge. And then in the second half, we see that just crumble. She is
right.
falling apart. She's in a free fall. She does not feel like she has any control. And I don't think she has, I think she wants to be like a leader. She's good at it. I don't think she has ever felt like she was in control because towards the end, she's talking with Ruby and talking about how she feels like she said something to the effect of like, have I ever stopped you or your father or anyone from doing what they were going to do? She hasn't.
Right.
She's reprimanded people, she's been upset with people, but she was notoriously bad at stopping bad things from happening. And I really like in that line specifically where she says you or your father or anyone, because I feel like the phrase anyone has a larger implication of Lazuli, who
Mhm.
entirely is this character who has a million different ideas of anything that could be happening at any given moment. And Caramelinda could not talk her out of it. Caramelinda could not talk her out of like dying, and she could not talk her out of joining this war, doing all these different things. She was so hard trying to like keep her grounded, and Lazuli was Lazuli and did what she needed to do. And so I feel like
Right.
Caramelinda has this complex of like she wants to affect change so desperately, but because of her position, she is unable to be able to make the change that she wants to make.
Right. Well, and also even like because I love getting meta and talking about the form, but like the fact that Caramelinda is an NPC and not a player character means that quite literally she has less agency in the effect of the story than the six players at the table do.
Yeah. But Brennan
And
tries.
I think yeah, he tries. He says, I think, in one of the adventuring parties that he is the number one Caramelinda fan, which I fully support. He's like, I love Caramelinda. And she is. I wrote down she's very clearly his DNPC.
Oh yeah.
In this campaign, especially in the latter half, where she is not only the one that is driving a lot of the conflict with regards to Saccharina, but she's also the one that exposition dumps to everyone in the first episode,
Mm-hmm.
and she's the one that figures out how to use the teleportation rooms to get them to the Buzzybrook battle set,
Mm-hmm.
right? I was going somewhere with this. Oh, yes. So her being an NPC also, I think, relates to the reason why the other players at the table like do not like really interact with her and her grief at the end of this show. There's like multiple scenes where her and Ruby specifically have like a mother-daughter fight, and then Ruby walks away, and then Caramelinda's like, Amithar, and Amithar's like, I'm gonna go talk. Or well, no, Lou is like, I'm gonna go talk to Siobhan because Siobhan's one of the other players.
Yeah.
At least I maybe not the primary driving reason. I think there's also a narrative reason why Amithar would be closer to his daughters than he would be to his wife. But
Oh yeah.
I do think that there is a meta level to that as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's something really interesting about how Caramelinda interacts with all the PCs, because she doesn't really talk to Lapan or Cumulus for that matter. But it's interesting. Cumulus, she does recognize Cumulus as like this CIA operative of Lazuli's, so she's like familiar with him. But
Right.
or he's familiar with her rather. But she obviously spends a lot of time talking with Lou, talking with Amithar, and their dynamic is just like so fascinating to me because it is he is constantly as a character living in the shadow of all of his sisters. just that the first scene he's in, he's literally towering in the shadow of these giant statues of his sisters. He is perpetually not Leslie, and that is his biggest flaw. Among other things,
Yeah.
he's a coward, and she tells him that. She says, "You're a coward, and I do not. And when you're a coward, you hide," which I think is very interesting because when she's a coward, she acts. She pushes people away. Um, the other aspect of it is she talks to Ruby a lot because it's her daughter, and I think they have a very beautiful relationship as like a mother-daughter NPC PC duo. Um, and the other two characters, for Liam, I found it so interesting how much she tried to like communicate with Liam because she had such a very good relationship with like it seemed like she was trying in the first episode to like develop a relationship with Liam. It seems like they're from very similar statures, right? Like both of them people who are on like a lower level, and she's trying to explain, hey, if you want to get out of this crappy situation you're in, then you have to get married because that's what she had to do. And she was lucky enough to be engaged to someone she liked, but then that got ripped away from her. So she's trying to prevent that from another person.
And I also think that there is an element where she sees Liam as one of her children.
Yeah.
Right? Like, she says in episode 9, I think, she's like, it's the line that you mentioned earlier about none of my progeny or nephew, Liam, this includes you, are going to be war guys in this house.
Yeah.
Right? So she is like protective of him in the same from a parental perspective, but you're right, it takes a different form with Liam because she knows the like material reality of his status in the hierarchy.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. You can totally tell the moment in the campaign where Liam suddenly, or like realistically, Ali suddenly starts doubting Caramelinda as like, is she actually evil or like what's happening there?
Right.
Because it's right around the betrayal in episode 9 that suddenly Liam wants nothing to do with Caramelinda. And I mean, like the last scene is Liam trying to ask Caramelinda if she killed Catherine, and that's not true at all. She just was so scared the whole time. God, their dynamic's interesting, and it's entirely meta fueled, in my opinion. The other character that beyond Saccharina and Caramelinda, which I would love to dive a little bit deeper into that in a little bit, but Theo and her are very fascinating to me because he trusts Theo. Theo is the person, like in the early half of the season, she trusts him. This is the person who's going to watch over her kids while they're in the capital. And as soon as he comes back, she's like, okay, Theo's going to take you guys inside. Like, she trusts Theo to do his job. There's also something that I find super interesting is that during the siege, Brennan has Murph roll a perception check, and he gets a nat 1. And on the nat 1, he finds Caramelinda, and that has haunted me. What could have... What? Why is that the worst possible scenario is you find her?
Yeah. That is,
I don't know.
Weird.
I'm not trying to I'm not trying to dictate because I've made stupid decisions as a DM before, but...
Or not even like the worst possible scenario. It's what is the success that is the opposite of the failure that is finding Caramelinda. That is fascinating.
Yeah.
I didn't rewatch the final episodes because I was like, it's gonna be like mostly combat. It's gonna be so much rolling.
Yeah, no. But
I like combat. Okay. I feel like you can talk in like we'll go back to whatever you're gonna say. I like combat. I think the combat in NADDPOD is so good.
Yes.
The combat in Dimension 20 is very long and very boring to me sometimes, and I often will passively watch those episodes and sort of tune in whenever I can tell that there's like a roleplay thing going on. But I do like the crunchy like mechanical aspect of D&D as well.
I mean,
Okay,
that's
I've
not
said my
a
piece. Back to you.
No, you're so right. Going off of that though, for just a brief moment, there's
Mhm.
really good I really like the combat in the Crown of Candy specifically, which is a very controversial opinion. But I do love like Deep Blue Sea, Buzzy Brook, the Cathedral. Those are three of like my favorite combats in any actual play. The finale is something different, but I do really like a lot of like
Well,
the storytelling that can happen in combat in those episodes.
yeah, I think one of the things, not to go back to NADDPOD, but one of the things that Murph does so well when he designs encounters is that it's not always kill all the people.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about, not Deep Blue Sea, because that is kill all the people, but Buzzy Brook and the other one you mentioned, I can't remember, it
Cathedral,
flew out
yeah,
of my brain. The cathedral, the goal is not to win the fight. The goal is to make it out alive.
yeah,
And I think that is much more interesting from a narrative perspective. But also like it adds more tension from a meta perspective because a failure doesn't just mean failing an attack. A failure possibly means like dying
yeah,
or getting murdered. Anyway,
exactly.
anyway, what were before we started talking about combat? What is it that you were going to say?
I was talking about Theo, and I was talking about Theo and Caramelinda's relationship, which I do think is the root of a lot of why people don't like her. They don't
Yeah,
like her because she is mean to Amithar and she is mean to Theo, and I think that's great. And I think we should complicate this woman. I think that that's a good thing. I'm gonna say I'm not gonna try and forgive her. I'm gonna say yeah, you should. Like that was a bad thing. She says it was a bad thing. She apologizes. But I think it's
for
so
sure.
good when she is so, like you said earlier, she's cutting with her words. She is someone who, when she's getting mad at him, there's like Brian says that there's like dark, venomous thoughts in her state of mind. She is very clearly like digging into something deep and mean. What I like about Caramelinda is that she is that mean girl. I don't even have to continue. She is that mean girl. I love her.
She
Um,
is that mean girl. I not to like psychoanalyze myself, but I feel like I relate to Caramelinda in that way where um I am just like so like generally either neutral to positive most of the time. But if I'm upset, I might not necessarily show it. But best believe I thought it and it's in my brain forever. So that the next time you piss me off for real, and I decide that I want to hurt you, then I can go, oh, here, let's bring this out and boom. Remember that?
yes, and that's what Caramelinda does so well is that she's pulling up old shit. She's saying, Theo, you were in love with my wife, and I'm not sure if you actually are committed to my family or if you were in love with her. And
Right.
he has to hit her with, sorry, yes, I loved your sister, your wife, excuse me, Amithar's sister. I love this family, and I loved her cause, is what I loved. And I love you, is what he says. And Caramelinda
Right.
cries and then apologizes eventually. I love how much emotion and anger that she holds on to, and I think it makes her one of the most compelling NPCs in like all of Dimension 20 for me.
Oh, for sure. Oh,
The other character dynamic is Sakurina, of course. And
oh, of course.
the main, because the thing is, Jet never interacts with Caramelinda alone. She's always with Ruby. So I'm more interested in like the Ruby
Right.
Caramelinda dynamic because they've had more one-on-one. And they both are like co-conspirators in this grief and in this dislike and discomfort with Sakurina. But the thing
Right.
that I love about Caramelinda is that she is the aggravator in this conflict, in the Sakurina Caramelinda conflict, because
Oh yeah.
she is the one who says, as she sees Port Syrup happen, she calls the meeting of the family immediate and is like, there's some big issues here. I'm kind of okay with her dying. This is a really bad thing. And it's also important to note that Caramelinda is a Bulbian. And
Right.
I think that's such an interesting dynamic to know that Lasley's like so big on bringing back Lost Acrosia, bringing in all of these like old magic, and Caramelinda is still like interested in the bulb. She still has faith. They're married underneath the Bulbian church. And it's just like a
Right.
really interesting dynamic that she's this magical caster, which is so anathema to like the doctrine of the Bulbian church, but she is someone who still casts that teleportation circle, things to that effect.
Right. And I think her relationship with being a Bulbian and also being Lazli's wife has a lot to do with the like actual cosmology of the world of Calorum, where it's revealed at a certain point that the bulb is nothing but this mindless power source. So even though she is a wizard, she's listed on the wiki as a wizard, not a cleric, but she is still technically tapping into the bulb to have these magical things happen around her.
Yeah.
And I just think that's really fascinating. My notes are so unorganized. I literally wrote most of this morning. I wrote Caramelinda has Catholic guilt out the wazoo. So I don't know if I can expand on that, but that is one of the notes I wrote down yesterday.
I do love that. I do love that she has like this guilt that just drives her. Her whole character is guilt driven in some degree or another. It's grief, it's guilt, it's a combination of both, a deadly combination of both, and it's fear. I mean,
Right.
One of my favorite things, this is a totally different sidetrack. One of my favorite things about Caramelinda is that the most common thread between her and Saccharina is not necessarily that they're both like these very brilliant queens. They're not. It's not just that they're two queens maximizing their joint slay. It is also there's this moment where they look at each other and they share a like look of pain and camaraderie for living a life that neither of them asked for. Neither of them wanted to be in these like terrible positions, and they're just having to figure out what they're doing.
Exactly. That is also a line that I wrote down because it is just a moment of camaraderie as you watch someone who is living a life they also did not ask for. Ugh, God. So, I mean, I feel like this is pretty obvious, but Brennan Lee Mulligan is just great with poetry, and the fact that a lot of this is improvised is very impressive.
Yeah, a lot of, especially the things that Caramelinda says are like so raw. Like, there's a line when she's talking about Saccharina and like how dangerous she is that she's like, the future of Candia is one of flame. Like, that's crazy. That's crazy. Did you come up with that off the cuff? That's crazy, dude. But she's like a character who's poised and speaking deliberately and like has so much thought behind every word she says. Because if she screws up what she says, she sees it as like life or death. She could die. She's in such a fear primal animal state, is how I read her, at least, is that she's so scared.
Right.
And I think that's such a central portion. I've said this like 10 times.
For sure. I wanted to go back because we were talking about like character dynamics. I wanted to go back to Lepan because something that I hadn't necessarily realized the first time I watched A Crown of Candy is that I think it's implied that Lazuli made a deal with the Sugar Plum Fairy, and that that final like hailstorm of arrows that she sacrifices her life is maybe like the third wish that she in this deal with the Sugar Plum Fairy, and that is how she like literally sacrifices her life. And Caramelinda in the first episode, obviously Lepan dies before Caramelinda comes back into the narrative, but it's so clear that she trusts Lepan like implicitly.
Mm-hmm.
It's like almost no question to her that he is competent and capable. And she says it's because he is a primogen of the Bulbian Church, but there's no confirmation for this. This is wild speculation. I choose to believe that there is an element of there's some part of Caramelinda that knows and sees the connection between Lazuli and Lepan and where they are getting their magic from, and is like, oh, he is the closest thing to the one person in my life that I ever truly like completely loved and trusted. So I am like almost without question, obviously Lip Pant's gonna go with you guys.
That's a really good point. I've never really considered it. I always thought it was like, oh, and this is the guy who's supposed to be teaching my daughters. But I like that interpretation a lot. That it's all Leslie, man. She was so upset when she found out that Leslie didn't tell her about Amithar's marriage. That hurt. This is just politics. It's all about Leslie, man.
Yeah.
She's a character who's propelled by grief before her daughters are even ripped away from her.
Right. Oh my gosh. Okay. And okay, not to bring it back to NADDPOD again. But and also spoilers for campaign 3 of NADDPOD, by the way, what I'm about to talk about. Okay, so Callie, right, has this really strained relationship with her mother, and then it is revealed at a certain point that Callie's mother was an oracle, and there is this, and they explore this idea that if you can see the future, if you know what's going to happen, and you know that your actions can directly affect it, the automatic reaction is to isolate yourself and push people away so as to protect the future that you want to happen. And I think, I'm pretty sure Lazuli is also an oracle, right? I don't
know.
remember.
She's
I'm not
maybe not
good.
an oracle. She's more like someone who can. I guess that would be an oracle, but like someone who can see multiple worlds, multiple realities at once. She's like a really tight wizard.
This idea that that Caramelinda is then the Callie in this relationship where they love each other, they really do, but in a certain way, because Lazuli knows maybe that Caramelinda is going to be this huge affecting force for good potentially in the future, she can't fully open up to this person. And when you're on the other side of that dynamic, it really fucking hurts when you find out that the one person that you thought you trusted the most and would never keep any secrets from is keeping an entire part of their life a secret from you.
Yeah. And I think it's just like that's a really cool comparison to see that sort of dynamic, because then Caramelinda keeps secrets from Ruby and Jet, and that's Ruby says, like, if you were more honest with us, maybe this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, she says in that conversation where that happens, Ruby's like, "Can you teach us how to do that?" And Caramelinda goes, "Oh, so now you want to learn something?" I love that. I love that. She's so funny.
I also love that she's like, that I didn't teach you this because I didn't want to give you more tools so you could run away from me.
And because that is ultimately how she sees what happened to Lazuli. Lazuli got so absorbed in this magic that she lost her to it. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
And so the fear then again is that, if she teaches her children this magic, it'll just be a repeat of what happened in the past.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about motherhood a little bit more, because I think there is this idea in both the narrative, like some of the characters I think believe this, but also in the fandom, that Caramelinda is a bad mom. And I want to say that I think Caramelinda is the best mom that we get in A Crown of Candy, like, bar none. Like, if we're comparing and contrasting Caramelinda with the other major mother that we see in the show, which is Spiria. Spiria's nice. She's really sweet. She's a terrible fucking mother. I mean, she let her child be abused not only by his siblings, but also his father and like everyone else in the castle for years and did nothing to protect him. She's nice. She like takes his feelings into account. Like, she's there to listen and talk, But Caramelinda she is like actively doing what she thinks is best for her children, whether they like it or not, which is something that good parents do.
Mm-hmm. I agree entirely. I think it's really interesting in contrast with the other mothers who are introduced. It's Spiria, and then there's also Amathar's mother, Pamelia Rocks, who is introduced more in like Ravening War as a more active character. But she's also in a flashback in A Crown of Candy, and she is someone who is very similar to Caramelinda. I think she is very like, she's running the castle. Jadane is just some guy who has a big crown on his head. And it's very much the women run the show in this campaign, which I think is like really fun. A Podcast of Candy does a fantastic episode diving in depth on how women are propelling the narrative. And I think that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. But
common W for A Podcast of Candy,
so
slaying
true,
an episode.
So true. Everyone should listen to it. But I think for Caramelinda specifically, people try and portray this idea of that she is a bad mother. I think she definitely thinks that about herself. I disagree. I think she's a complex mother. I think she's someone who is flawed. She has made mistakes. She does things that are wrong. She's sometimes a little harsh, but it's entirely understandable, and it's all coming from a place of love. It is all coming from a place of she wants her kids to be safe. And I feel like that is a fundamental want of a mother like that.
Exactly.
And she's also not asking them to do crazy things. She's like, hey, go to school. Hey, please don't run away. Hey, please
stop running away. Yourselves. Don't go into the city. You're royals. There are assassins waiting at every turn, potentially. And hey, plot twist, she was fucking right. So
Caramelinda was right. End of the story. Actually, she was wrong about some things, but
Caramelinda never did anything wrong. The Complicated Women podcast is only interested in erasing the failures of women and only talking about their positive traits. That is
she's negative. I love that she sucks. Caramelinda sucks, and I love her so much.
Yeah.
She's great. I actually think she's a great character, but I like her failures. I like that she did bad things, and it makes me like her more that she did bad things. That's my thesis. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yes. While we're talking about motherhood, I wanted to, while I was rewatching, specifically the funeral scene and watching the way that Amathar and Ruby both kind of, or that the way that Amathar takes Ruby's side a lot of the time against Caramelinda reminded me of this quote. It's a pretty famous quote. You may have heard it. It's by Bonnie Burstow. Often, father and daughter look down on mother, parentheses, woman, together. They exchange meaningful glances when she misses a point. They agree that she is not bright as they are, cannot reason as they do. This conclusion does not save the daughter from the mother's fate. And I think that is something that, very much is present in the Rocks family dynamic.
That is so good. Oh my god, I've never thought about that quote with that family, but yeah, exactly. It's so much, she's the villain to the family in many ways, but in fact, she is just a woman who is not going to always tell them yes.
Right. She's forced to be the bad cop parent because Amathar is completely ineffectual when trying to do anything, or when trying to emotionally confront anything. He's very good at physical confrontation. He's very good at fighting, but when it comes to his emotions or the emotional well-being of the people around him, he completely falls on his ass.
Yeah, and he's so good at avoiding hard conversations. And Caramelinda is then forced to have the hard conversations.
And she, in the first episode, I think she's like, we're supposed to do a united front here, fuckhead. Yeah. Like, why are you undermining me in front of our children right now? And then, somewhat related to that quote in general, I think it is very interesting that Caramelinda and Ruby as mother and daughter only really come together and bond again after after Jet's death, when they both have a common enemy that is not only a woman, but also a secret daughter family member, right? So they are, once again, they're like, it's not only that they have this common enemy, but they have this common enemy that has now replaced Caramelinda's role in the family unit of, she is now the enemy that we are all going to gang up against.
Oh yeah, that's interesting how Sakurina joins into the family unit. It's even more interesting on a meta level, which again, this is not the Sakurina episode, but you can't talk about Caramelinda without talking about Sakurina. Is that on a meta level, Emily did not want to be like, she's like sending messages to Brennan being like, Sakurina will not want to be Amathar's daughter. She does not care to do that. And but then she does yearn to have a family still. Maybe it's not that daughter, and I guess that's another conflict of Ruby and Sakurina more. Because Caramelinda has no obligation to treat her like family whatsoever.
Right, of course.
And which makes the most sense as to why she's kind of leading the charge of Sakurina is dangerous and she's posing a threat to the kingdom I've worked so hard to build.
And the kingdom that I one day want to give to one of my daughters.
Yes.
Right? If I have sacrificed my relationship with my daughters and incidentally the life of one of my daughters to try and prepare them for this role that they were never going to get in the first place, I can't imagine, like, that would be so emotionally devastating to realize that all this work and all this sacrifice has been for nothing.
Yeah. Wow, that's devastating. And
Yeah.
this is, in fact, entirely unrelated, tangentially related. I'm thinking so
We
much
love
about
tangents.
Caramelinda as a character who is inherently selfless. Like she's ready to give up her throne because it's what's right. She's kind of like dragging her feet about it, but she's like, Saccharine is the easy answer. But the moment she finds out that she actually is queen and that her marriage was legit, that pivots the entire narrative. However, I do love the idea of Sir Amanda Maillard as a character. Beautiful, love that. Sorry, rip Liam, I wish you would have died.
Yeah.
Sorry to love a knight. It is my fault. But I do love this idea that is very commonly considered when people think about Caramanda as a dynamic, is this being the one thing she can be selfish about, is to have
Right.
a knight to herself, to have this sort of thing that she is so selfless and tries to give herself to make sure this kingdom can thrive. And this would be the one thing that she doesn't have to share, that she doesn't have to do something noble for. Anyways, I think about Amanda at least once a month. Quangle, drop, wed.
Literally. I know virtually nothing about the backup PCs that we did not get. But I do know that that Amanda Maillard is like a fan favorite. And so I am very excited for Quangle to finally drop.
So true.
I'm looking through my notes trying to see if I have any other points that I really want to hit. Is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you really want to make sure we hit?
I think my just general thing that I want to leave for a note on Caramelinda is the same note that Brennan leaves it on. Caramelinda as a character is afraid, but she really grows throughout the campaign. You see a distinct arc. Her status quo is that she is in charge. She's large and in charge. She is the Punisher in the family dynamic. She is the person who reprimands people for misbehaving. When her world starts to crumble, you see her crumble. She's in this free fall of paranoia, of fear, of just scrambling to get any fraction of her life back. But I think the last conversation she has with Ruby is so potent to me because it's a conversation about forgiveness, and it's not just forgiving Saccharina, giving Saccharina another chance. I think in many ways, the end of the entire season, the last scene she's in, is trying to get forgiveness for herself. I think
Yeah,
this whole thing is learning to forgive herself for what happened to Lasley, for what happened to Jet, for what happened to her home, forgiving herself for being so cruel. I think that that is a huge part of her arc that often gets overlooked, especially in fan discussions, is that she has to learn this degree of forgiveness.
for sure. And I think also what helps with that is that like she sees like Ruby able
Mm-hmm.
to forgive her, because Ruby also
Yes.
blames Caramelinda for Jet's death. But
Oh, yeah.
once Ruby is finally on the other side of that, it allows Caramelinda to finally absolve herself of this like weight that she is putting on her own shoulders.
Yes.
All
Anyways,
right.
woman of all time. Love her.
Woman of all time, truly. Love Caramelinda. I'm always shouting for a sequel season of A Crown of Candy. Doing the research, I only ever watched the first episode of Ravening War. I didn't finish it. Now I kind of think that I might finish it because
I
I
would
was reading
recommend.
about like,
God, sorry.
or no, I was gonna say I think I had similar feelings with the first episode of Ravening War that I did with Junior Year, where it just like didn't really grab me. And then the more I've heard about the stuff that happens in future episodes down the line, once they really get into it, really interests me. So
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
Maria's character is phenomenal. I will also say the way that I feel about Amango is really really something for me. That is a complicated woman. That is a mother in grief. That is a woman who starts as a like I'm not going to continue because I am not brushed up enough, but we could talk about it at a different time, my other feelings on it. However, I would recommend giving it at
Right.
least a watch through.
Again, while we're wrapping up here, I wanted to say that I realized that this is the second episode in a row of A Crown of Candy characters. And like I said earlier, it's my podcast. I can talk about my favorite season if I want to. However, if you don't like A Crown of Candy, do not worry. We are going to be switching seasons starting in the episode after this one. I'm not going to give any spoilers for who we're going to talk about or who's going to be guesting on it, but I did want to reassure the ACOC haters that we're not going to be in Calorum forever. With all of that having been said, Laney, is there anything that you would like to plug here at the end of our episode?
Yes, I would love to plug something. I would love to plug the Calderon Cookbook. It was one of my favorite projects I've been a part of in this fan space. Right now, you could be able to get a virtual copy of the Calderon Cookbook, which features a ton of recipes that I personally regularly use. You're able to get it if you donate to eSIMs for Gaza. Send a screenshot of your purchase, and you'll be able to the account, and you'll be able to get your version of the PDF cookbook. I'd highly recommend it. There's all sorts of good stuff in there. The shakshuka recipe is crazy good. Broccoli, cheddar soup, pretty good. Anywho, you should definitely consider donating and get yourself a free cookbook while you're at it.
Hard second on that plug. As a proud owner of a physical copy of the Calorum Cookbook, and also someone who is famously and not proud of it, a picky eater, the recipes in that are great, and the art in that is also fantastic. Donate, get a copy of it just to look at the artwork because it's all fabulous.
Yeah.
If you're interested in more information about the Calorum Cookbook, you can go to @CalorumCookbook on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
I also wanted to plug here at the end D20 Artists for Palestine, where you can donate to Doctors Without Borders and get a free commission from some very talented artists in the fandom, and also maybe some potential future guests. No spoilers, but I've got some fun things in the works. If that is of any interest to you, you can go to at D20AFP for sure on Twitter. I think it's probably also their Tumblr, but I don't know for sure because I'm a bad podcast host and I didn't do my research before we started the record. Finally, before we end and plug our personal stuff, I'm also going to be linking to a collective of GoFundMes for families in Gaza, as well as Sudan and the Congo, who are trying to escape the genocides that are currently taking place in all of those places. So if you are one of the people who bought a Dimension 20 Mini and you have disposable income, consider directly helping a family escape genocide. Laney, where can the people find you on the internet?
I'm in one location only, and that's the hearts of the people. Just kidding. I am on twitter.com, and I am at Caramelinda Rocks with an X, not a CKS, and that is because there are not enough characters to do that.
If you want to follow me on any of my personal stuff, I'm pretty much everywhere on the internet at Andrew D. That is the @ symbol, AT, Andrew D. Yes, I stole that from Nathan Yaffe. You can also follow the podcast's Twitter at Complex Women Pod. Laney, I had so much fun having you on and talking about Caramelinda.
Oh, it's been a blast. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. You definitely led the charge here, and I so appreciate it.
The thing is I love Caramelinda, and I'd love to talk all the time about her. So this is just enrichment for me.
All right. That is the end of the episode. I will see you all next time. Bye.
See you next time. Bye.
Video versions of the Complicated Women podcast can be found on our YouTube channel, at Complicated Women Pod. You can listen to audio-only episodes on Spotify, or by going to our Twitter, at Complex Women Pod, and using the RSS feed link there to listen on your podcast app of choice.